Hi everybody, welcome to TBLT, the task-based language teaching channel. I am Koen Van Gorp and I will talk to you today about how do you like your TBLT, strong or weak. This is me. I'm an assistant professor of applied linguistics at Michigan State University. I train future teachers of English worldwide in the TESOL program at Michigan State and help teachers in the state of Michigan to get their English as a second language endorsement. I've worked extensively with primary school teachers in culturally and linguistically diverse contexts in Flanders, Belgium, teaching Dutch as a second language. My research interests are task-based language teaching and assessment and multilingualism. You can see there my email address if you want to contact me. So let's start exploring the difference between a strong and a weak TBLT. And let me ask you the question, as a teacher, how would you plan a holiday itinerary with your students? Would you just divide them into groups and ask them to plan it one step at a time, revise it as necessary? Or would you feel that it is necessary to first teach all the grammar and the vocabulary that the students need to start planning such a holiday itinerary? So basically, the difference is a question about what comes first, the task or the linguistic structures. So how do we conceptualize our language course and language learning experiences? Are vocabulary lists and grammar rules the key to building language, or are the tasks that we need and want the key to building up the language learning experience? So join me as we explore the contrasts and the differences between strong and weak task-based language teaching and discover which method truly prepares learners for the real world. Although I already place a caveat here, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. So strong or weak TBLT? Why does it matter? Both serve the same goal, developing the language proficiency that additional language learners need. However, there is a fundamental difference in the foundational building blocks of a language course or a program and of the language learning teaching. The big question is, how do we learn language? Do we learn language by engaging in real-world tasks for a clear purpose and a real audience, by using language receptively, productively, and while we are using the language, we are also analyzing the language? Or are we want to first master linguistic elements and structures, vocabulary and grammar, one by one, to then string them all together in actual language use? The debate is about what is at the heart of language teaching and learning and how learners can reach that high level of language proficiency that they need to function outside of the classroom in the real world. So basically, it's about a different theoretical take on language teaching. Let's first explore strong TBLT. Strong TBLT assumes that language is too complex to be explicitly taught in its entirety in a comprehensive set of rules. It must be learned primarily, implicitly, and incidentally, while learners' attention is on doing the tasks, on learning to do the tasks. So it's all about the focus on meaning. Language must be encountered repeatedly across all modalities, spoken, written, visual, oral, in meaningful contexts that allow the learners to notice the language, analyze the language, and master it, that is, to become fluent. So it's basically moving from the holistic whole, using the language, doing the language, down to the component level of elements and structures. That's what the language learners themselves do. Nevertheless, it also allows for a focused form because feedback is important, and feedback is felt to be most effective when it follows the breakdown in the learner's communication. That is, when they discover what they can and cannot yet do. That feedback allows the learners to immediately integrate useful information in their language performances. It is assumed to be most effective when it is reactive, when it is reacting to the learner's needs, and when it helps them to notice the language that needs improvement and the language gap in their performance that they then need to fill and take it to the next level of being an effective communicator and a strong language user. So weak TBLT has a different starting point. It still recognizes the importance of tasks, but the tasks are embedded in a pedagogic context which provides a more central role to the direct instruction of linguistic elements and structures. It is moving up from those linguistic structures, from the explicit knowledge that the students get from their teacher, to getting that knowledge automatized and combined in performing meaningful tasks. It follows a PPP paradigm, which is a presentation, practice, and production paradigm. It all starts there at the bottom of that pyramid with the presentation of forms, vocab, and grammar that is needed, that is necessary, and it's being taught explicitly and intentionally. The vocab and the grammar are considered necessary for performing the tasks. So it is a focus on forms rather than form. Then the students move to practice phase. It's a controlled practice phase, which means that they especially try to use the vocabulary and the grammar in more decontextualized exercises, which might be just one sentence with fill in the gap and then getting corrective teacher feedback. And going to the next step after the presentation, controlled practice, the students are supposed to be ready to apply all that they know, to apply the discrete elements in a free production phase. So that's the basis of a weak TBLT. Let's compare strong versus weak TBLT one more time. Strong TBLT focuses on task and moves down towards the linguistic elements. It's rooted in an interactionist, constructivist approach where the students construct the language for themselves based on the interaction with other students, with the tasks, with the teacher. It's all about implicit and incidental language learning. It has a strong focus on meaning, but nevertheless allows space for focus on form, explicit and intentional focus on language. It is assumed to be most effective when it's reactive, but it also allows for some proactive focus on language. It follows a pre-task, post-task cycle, the pre-task helping the students to prepare for the task, the post-task cycle allowing affordances for reflection on the task performance, but also to engage in a deeper and more meaningful focus on form approach. The weak TBLT, on the other hand, is task supported. It is moving up from discrete elements to integrating them into language use, into performing a task. It's based on a cognitive and a skill acquisition approach. It focuses on explicit and intentional language learning by focusing on different forms that are taught proactively, and then the students are helped to integrate those forms through focused practice, moving to free practice, and it is in this free practice often that meaningful communicative tasks have a role to play. It follows a PPP, presentation, practice, and production paradigm. So let's make this concrete. The task here is writing a letter to the city council. The context is students will write a formal letter to the city council to request action on improving road safety near their school after a fellow student was hit by a car. It aims at grade level 10 to 12 or 15, 16 years old and up. And so they are asked to write a formal letter, a request to act, and the letter should clearly outline the problem, suggest potential solutions, and appeal to the council's responsibility to ensure the safety of all residents and thus also the students. The duration is 2 class periods, approximately 90 to 120 minutes of teaching. So let's look at how this lesson would translate in a strong versus a weak task-based lesson. The strong task-based lesson would start with the teacher introducing the real-world scenario, the traffic accident near the school, and would outline the writing goal to write a very strong request to get the city council to act. The students would then probably brainstorm, share their thoughts on what road safety measures could be taken. They would move to small groups where they would draft their letters, and the teacher would walk around, scaffold and guide where necessary, both language and content. The students would provide feedback on each other's letters. The main criteria would probably be clarity of message and persuasiveness of arguments, but they would also allow for a focus on form and to correct the language if needed. The students would then revise and create their final letters, and then in a wrap-up class discussion and reflection, the teacher would provide feedback on the process and the product of writing the letter, and could potentially include a focus on form activity as well. The weak task-supported writing lesson would probably start again with an introduction of the writing goal, but also with an introduction of the relevant language structures. That could be the genre, the formal letter, that could be how we would address the city council. It could be focusing on modality and some of the key vocabulary probably related to traffic safety and traffic accidents. The students would practice their vocabulary and language structures, probably in a decontextualized kind of exercises when fill in the gaps. Then the teacher would provide them with a template of a letter specifying where the language is needed, where they could insert the modals, for example, or certain structures they've learned. The students would write their letters individually, following the template. Then they would get feedback on the clarity of the letters, but also on the accurateness of their language use by the teachers, but also hopefully by other fellow students. The students would then revise and submit their final letters, and the teacher would provide overall feedback on the quality of the letters and on the accurateness of the students' language use. Approach. Having gone through all of that, what are the takeaways? Strong forms of TBLT are all about tasks. They are at the heart of teaching, learning, and assessment. Weak forms of TBLT are task-supported. Tasks are important, but they represent a more traditional approach to language teaching and learning. They start from the linguistic elements and structures, moving up to doing tasks. One could also say that they are task-infused. The goal of both forms are to develop the language proficiency of the learners, but the roads to reach that goal are theoretically and pedagogically different. At the end of both roads, we would like to assess, nevertheless, if students are able to perform the tasks that they need to do in the sort of proficiency performance-based testing. Final reflections. The strong form of TBLT is deeply rooted in the belief that language learning is best achieved through direct, meaningful interaction and performing meaningful, goal-directed tasks that have a clear link with the real world. Hey, writing that letter to the city council after something has occurred in their own context. The weak version of TBLT integrates elements of traditional language teaching with task-based activities. The version is more eclectic. It draws on both structural and communicative approaches. What road is best might depend on a lot of factors in both teachers and learners, in their beliefs, in their expectations, in their experiences. So there is no one-size-fits-all. What counts is that we as teachers help our learners become efficient language users and use an approach that works best in our context and for us and our learners, and that's of course the most important one. Some suggestions for future study. I would definitely recommend Martin East's Foundational Principles of Task-Based Language Teaching. It's published by Routledge. It's open access. Chapter 4 focuses on this distinction between strong and weak TBLT. My former colleague, Chris Van Branden's recent book, How to Teach an Additional Language to Task or Not to Task, in Chapter 1, he addresses the differences between these two approaches. If you want to know more on how to build a syllabus, I would recommend Rod Ellis' 2019 Towards a Modular Language Curriculum for Using Tasks, in which he explores how would you combine a more task-based versus a task-supported approach, and which one would be most useful for which kinds of learners. So thank you very much for tuning in, listening to me. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have further questions. You can reach me at the email address of Van Gorp K, my last name and initial of my first name, at MSU Michigan State University.edu. Thank you, and I hope you have a great day.